The Iranian people are afraid of going hungry because of Trump's brutal blockade. Recent reports indicate that Iran is approaching the so-called day zero, when the supply system can no longer meet the demand. Tehran has gone on alert due to power shortages, fear of supply shortages, and pressure in the Strait of Hormuz. This Thursday, April 30th, 2026, the Iranian regime tries to project strength but appears trapped within its own crisis. President Masoud Pezeshkian asked Iranians to reduce their electricity consumption. While the Islamic Revolutionary Guard talks about resistance and tries to push the idea that Washington should back down, the reality inside Iran is harsher. The government is asking people to save electricity, businesses are feeling the squeeze, water has become a national risk, and the Gulf ports remain stifled by American pressure. I'll tell you all about this in a moment. But now you'll want to make sure you're subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information with the best journalistic quality you've ever seen. Milson Alves, setting the standard for credibility. Washington's logic is to force the regime to accept strict limits on its nuclear program and the military power that sustains its regional influence. The American government wants Tehran to understand that it can't close Hormuz, put pressure on global oil markets, support militias, and still demand sanctions relief as if nothing had happened. Instead of admitting the size of the problem, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard tries to turn the crisis into a victory narrative. But speeches don't turn on the lights, don't fill the tanks, and don't put expensive food back on the table. President Masoud Pezeshkian asked Iranians to reduce their electricity consumption in a speech released on April 25th. The official message tried to deny any immediate shortage, but the request showed the pressure. When a government has to ask its people to accept less electricity in the midst of war, sanctions, and blockade, the problem is no longer just military. It becomes domestic, daily, felt inside the home. The crisis did not start today. It was built over years of mismanagement, drought, and dependence on old infrastructure. Water has become one of the most dangerous issues. Recent reports indicate that Iran is approaching the so-called day zero, when the supply system can no longer meet the demand. Pezeshkian has already warned that residents of Tehran might even have to be evacuated if the water crisis worsens. Without water, the power goes out. Without power, pumps stop. Without pumps, homes, factories, and hospitals come under stress. That's when the crisis becomes a chain reaction. The drought reduces the power of hydroelectric plants. The war damages the infrastructure. The lack of parts makes repairs more expensive. The pressure on ports makes imports more difficult. The power supply becomes unstable. Transportation gets slower. Food arrives at a higher price. The worker loses income, and the regime, instead of explaining the size of the mistake, asks for sacrifice and calls it resistance. Reuters also showed that the Iranian economy is experiencing intense pain, although it hasn't completely collapsed yet. The regime tries to survive with stockpiles. Trade through land borders, reserves, and alternative routes, but surviving is not winning. The report mentioned business owners in Tehran saying that high prices, supply chain disruptions, and internet shutdowns have crushed businesses. A rice and grain seller estimated a drop of about 40% in sales since the beginning of the war. When food doesn't completely disappear from the shelves but becomes unaffordable, the crisis enters people's homes. Expensive food, lower income, uncertain transportation, and fear that supplies will get worse if Hormuz remains blocked. Ordinary people don't live off official statements. His life depends on the price of rice, bread, fuel, medicine, and the electric bill. If all of that goes up at the same time, propaganda loses its power. The regime may say it can handle it. It's the people who pay. The port of Bandar Abbas shows that Iranian fragility didn't start now. In April 2025, a large explosion hit the Shahid Rajai area in Iran's largest port, leaving at least 18 dead and more than 700 injured according to Reuters. At the time, authorities pointed to the possibility of poor storage of chemicals. The incident already revealed carelessness and vulnerability. In such a vital facility, with war, blockade, and maritime insecurity now in play, every past failure weighs even more heavily. Tehran's strategic mistake was believing that the world's fear of Hormuz would always protect the regime. For a long time, the threat worked because the strait is vital for energy, trade, and fertilizers. But the current crisis has shown the other side. If Iran closes the passage, it also isolates itself. If it tries to charge for passage, it becomes a target for sanctions. If it uses the Islamic Revolutionary Guard to intimidate ships, it scares insurers, shipping companies, and buyers. The regime wanted to control the faucet. Now it discovers that it also depends on it. The American position is tough because Trump sees this moment as a chance to break decades of blackmail. The Sofan Center pointed out that Washington believes that blocking Iranian ports could force concessions on the nuclear program. The same analysis highlighted that Iranian leaders want to resist, betting on rising oil prices and international political backlash against Trump. This is Tehran's calculation: suffer now to try to get a better deal later. But this calculation ignores a simple question: how long can the people endure? The Islamic Revolutionary Guard tries to respond with threats. They say the blockade is a violation, talk about retaliation, insist there will be no submission, and try to show that the United States is also under pressure. But the difference is clear. Washington is under political and economic pressure. Tehran is under existential pressure. On one side, Trump is dealing with oil prices and criticism. On the other side, the Iranian regime faces unstable electricity, scarce water, businesses going bankrupt, struggling families, and young people who no longer believe the official narrative. The negotiations around Islamabad have become a symbol of this deadlock. American representatives were involved in a new round of talks, but progress stalled. The Iranian regime wants to discuss relief, passage through Hormuz, and guarantees. Washington wants real limits on nuclear capabilities and on Tehran's ability to keep using the region as a shield. Negotiations are stalled since both sides know conceding has a cost. But for Iran, each day of delay weighs heavily internally, and that's why talk of surrender sounds so absurd. When the Islamic Revolutionary Guard or the hardline Iranian faction try to sell the idea that the United States should be the one to kneel, the contrast becomes glaring. It's the Iranian citizen who is being asked to save energy. It's Iranian businesses that are selling less. It's Iranian ports that are under pressure. It's Iran's water supply that's reaching its limit. It's Iranian industry that depends on parts, energy, and transportation in crisis. That doesn't mean the regime will fall tomorrow. Reuters itself pointed out that Iran still has survival mechanisms and that immediate collapse is not guaranteed. The point is something else. Survival has become more expensive, more painful, and more unstable. The regime can resist through coercion, stockpiling, and alternative trade, but each week at this pace increases the wear and tear. Repression can silence a street for a while. It can't force food prices down. It can't make it rain. In the end, the image from this Thursday is powerful. Tehran asks for austerity at home, while its hardliners talk as if they could force Washington to surrender. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard wants to appear relentless, but the real Iran is tired. Trump might even be surprised by the regime's stubbornness, but the pressure has already shown results. And when a regime needs to ask its people for sacrifice while promising to humiliate the United States, the problem is no longer about strength, it becomes about desperation. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and at the end, check out the comments so you can be even more engaged with the Milson Alves community.